Okay, hello friends. I'm going to attempt to do a 10-minute breakdown of the Aaron Rodgers interview that Joe Rogan did on his podcast. Now, a lot was talked about. If you know Joe Rogan, he gives these super long interviews to random people in media, science, all of these different categories, and sports. So, Aaron Rodgers, they did about an hour and a half to an hour, no, it was like 2.5 hour long video interview. And they got into some interesting topics and topics I've been going down some rabbit holes in. So, of course, I wanted to share some of the talking points. So, what I'm going to do, I'm going to give you the quick summary, and then I would love to hear your favorite topics that you want to go deeper on, and then we will go a little bit deeper. So, with Aaron Rodgers, there's a lot of things that he said, that he spoke about, and his stance on certain things where, you know what? I was in agreement. I have some things that I feel the same way, but there's also a lot of things that I do not agree with. I do not co-sign, and I will advise you to tread cautiously with some of his take on, especially the discussion on the Bible and Christianity and his discussion on ayahuasca. Okay, I saw him post about that in a separate podcast, and I will be making a video about what's the spiritual implications of doing plant medicine like ayahuasca, where you go on these spiritual journeys where people aren't acknowledging the existence of the demonic realm. And so where do they stand with that? Are they protected? Are they opening doors? So that I'm going to just put that there at the beginning, because I don't want you watching this podcast and then go trying to copy what Aaron Rodgers does. But let's just get right into it. Okay, so right away, basically they get right into the discussion about the whole Pharmacia situation that was being imposed and forced on all NFL players. Pretty much the whole world was on this worldwide peer pressure to like do a certain thing, put a thing in your body, which again, I'm not here to tell you what to do, what's right or wrong. Like, I'm here to share what Rodgers was saying, acknowledge his situation, and acknowledge kind of some of the points he was making, and some of them I do agree with. So basically, they get into the time they recorded this podcast was around the time of the US Open. So, with that, Djokovic has been not allowed to play the US Open because of his stance of wanting to have a freedom of choice of what goes into his body. And Aaron Rodgers is like, yo, that's exactly where he was at in his career with his sport, trying to peer pressure him. So what I have to say about Aaron Rodgers and Djokovic is like, kudos to these guys for not giving into the pressure, the insults, the attacks, and really standing for their right to really choose what goes into their body. Like, as a Christian, free will, God created us with free will. That's always a very important factor when it comes to life and the way we interact with people. Once you take away free will, to me, that's a very evil stance to take. Okay, so I'm not saying you're right, you're wrong, but like, to take away free will, that's where I'm kind of like, something ain't lining up here. So kudos to Rodgers and Djokovic for really highlighting that as elite athletes, standing firm and not letting the love of money, right? The love of their career really hindering that and having them go back on their moral stance. They stood firm, and they did it at a price where Djokovic, he is risking another title, making history, right? And the money that comes along with winning those tournaments. So he's risking a lot. He's taking a huge financial hit as a result. And I can respect him for standing firm and speaking his truth and not letting others influence his life in a way that he doesn't want to. So kudos to those guys. And then Rodgers gave a little more explanation onto why he stood so firmly in his decision, because I didn't know this at the time, but it turns out he's allergic to this PEP. I forget what it stands for, but it's a known ingredient in a lot of the different medications, pharmaceutical medications, and specifically this Pharmacia that was being forced on him. So if you haven't realized, I'm using a code word for the little thing that they're injecting into people, because in the past people have been getting shut down just for speaking about it and using that word. So I'm like, hey, let me just use code words just in case that's still a thing. So basically, Pharmacia, or medical experiment, whatever you want to call it. So basically, he said he has this reaction, right? But it's not just any allergic reaction like, oh, a little sniffles, a little rash. Like, no, this is anaphylactic shock. Like, this is like, you react, you have some of this stuff, and your heart might stop type of reaction. Like, that's a pretty big deal. I have personal friends that I know with this type of reaction to different things like nuts, seeds, like peanuts. That's a common one that we all know. Like, people have different degrees of allergic response, and the anaphylactic shock is the most extreme, where you need like an EpiPen, like you stop breathing, like, you don't mess with random ingredients in your body if you have this type of reaction. And so for Rodgers, since he has that, he did everything to read, be informed, and apply educated wisdom into all his medical choices. So being that at the time that the NFL was kind of trying to force this medication on the entire NFL community, like the staff, the players, anyone who touched the realm of the NFL stadium, they were even not allowing fans for a time to go in unless they had gotten this pharmacia into their bodies, So, so basically at that time, the only shot that was available, I think the first one to him was the J&J, and that week before they had pulled it off the market because of blood clotting. So of course Rodgers is like, whoa, like I already have skepticism because of my allergic reaction and this ingredient being a key factor, but also it got pulled because of negative effects on the body. And so for an athlete who prides themselves on being strong and healthy and having cardiovascular health, like that was another confirmation on his end. So again, he found himself ironically as being the quarterback, the veteran on the team, like elite player who was always the leader. He went into this lesser class of this 2-class system that the NFL had created, where he was being shamed, bullied, ostracized, and there was only a few people that were in that place. So what a weird place for like the elite athletes to be after all that they have put into their careers and all the respect they have earned. Like, all of a sudden this like pharmaceutical medication is going to be the thing that like breaks it for everybody. So he said, he talked about his whole immunization, or saying he was immunized, and talking about how he had experts that the NFL hired to come in to kind of convince him to get this thing. And so, oh man, I'm already 8 minutes in. Okay, let's make this a 15-minute explanation. So I'm going to go quick. So he had experts come in. He basically explained how he was getting peer pressured by the NFL. And then basically he was able to stand with his information and ask questions that the experts that the NFL had hired couldn't answer. And so what he ended up doing, because he still kept getting pressured, was, my kind of interpretation of it is he used the media's tactics against them. So he was technically saying something using specific words, and it was worded in a tricky way so that you would assume what you wanted to hear. Okay, so the media does this all the time. They use tricky language and then you assume something, but they were actually saying something different. And so he did that, and then everyone gave him a hard time for saying he was immunized, saying that he had gotten the pharmacia when he actually didn't. But he actually did get some form of immunization, in the sense that he got a diluted form of the virus and took it orally as a form of immunization, just an alternate form of it. So that was his explanation. Then they went down these rabbit holes of like IRS employment, like how they're hiring people and they're putting in the application like you will be armed and might have to use lethal force. And these videos came out where people were like, oh, these IRS agents with guns, like acting like they're going to shoot somebody. So everyone's just kind of like, what's going on with that? Then they got into politics, of course. So, Rodgers and Rogan both agree, like, politics, it's a sham. It's this divisive mechanism where people are just so attached to the sides, each side that they stand on, that they're not willing to find a common ground. And that a lot of journalists now have bought into that as well, where they're so attached to a side that they are creating narratives based on their personal feelings and creating these sensationalist type of post where they're focusing on the clicks rather than the truth. And you know what? I think we're seeing a lot more of that. And then they also talked about Jamie Foxx. He had this like really hilarious Trump impression. Like I was like, whoa, that's impressive.
What's your favorite death row record, Mr. Trump?
All of them. All of the death row records. Don't try to pin me down. I see what he just... Excuse me.
Fake news.
Excuse me.
Fake news.
Fake news.
So I got a good laugh out of that. Then they talked about, Brittany Griner, right? How she openly was hating on basically America, right? And felt oppressed. Or I don't want to put words in her mouth, but she was not happy with the way America was treating people, certain groups of people, I guess. I don't know. But basically she learned that other countries aren't as free and aren't as fair. So she ended up getting arrested. So they were kind of talking about the whole irony of that situation. And then they got into the whole psychedelic use of Aaron Rodgers, how he's openly talking about his ayahuasca journeys and psychedelic mushrooms, all of that stuff, and how he's talking about being a completely different person afterwards. Now, he shares a lot of nice things and it sounds all good and dandy, but what I do have to say is they don't seem to fully understand the spiritual realm, right? They're just like, ooh, I had this fun spiritual experience and it must be good. And so he had a negative religious experience with his parents and the church, and therefore has a negative association with the Bible and the biblical God. So what's happening is he's searching, right? Every person is searching for that truth, right? And God is, what I have found to be the ultimate truth, the way and the life, right? Jesus is the truth. But what Aaron Rodgers is seeking specifically is the death to ego. And that's what people going on this journey, like Megan Fox has a video as well talking about this, and I've made some videos on this about Megan Fox. She said the same thing, death to ego. That's kind of the whole purpose of reaching enlightenment. So basically the question I have after that is like, a lot of these concepts that all of these people seeking enlightenment are saying and talking about and bringing up, they are all rooted in biblical truth. Like that's exactly death to ego. That is super biblical. And what is the ultimate death to the ego? Like, think of the best way to achieve that. Now, would it be A or B? A, meaning you think you're in control. You think you are your own God. You think you can manipulate nature in a way to have you get the things that you want, right? Or would it be submitting to the one and only creator of this universe and letting him guide you into your perfect divine plan that he has already written for you? Okay? A or B? You guys give me the answer. Which one makes more sense to be in a path to death, ultimate death to the ego? Okay? I already have my answer. I want to hear yours. So, in my personal opinion, submitting to our actual creator, that's the number one way to have death of ego, surrendering to know that, hey, I can't do anything without the person who created me, right? Without them, I am nothing. And so that's kind of the whole concept in the Bible of having the ultimate death to ego. Okay, so that's one little piece there. We'll go deeper in this topic in a separate video because, of course, I got a lot to say, but that's going to be my quick explanation for now. Then Rogan gets into his first encounter, with aliens, entities. Now, okay, y'all, aliens is a whole other topic that I can just go for hours on. If you're interested, buy Chuck Missler's book, Alien Encounters, just starting there. But Rogan talks about, he calls it disembodied consciousness, which exists in some realm that we can't normally tap into. So Rogan is correct in that there are disembodied, he called it consciousness, I call it spirits. Now, disembodied spirits, right, roaming the earth. We've talked about this before, right? Interacting with humans. We've talked about this before. But what he's missing is the spiritual awareness of knowing that there are good spirits and bad spirits, right? And how do you know that you are protected from the bad spirits, aka demonic spirits, which we have already seen in my past videos, that there is evidence of demonic spirits taking control and influencing human people and then getting cast out of those people in very dramatic ways. So if that's a real thing, Rogan is acknowledging spiritual entities is a real thing and interacting with people. So the one verse I want to put to you guys before I end this video, because we're already at 15 minutes. Okay, I'll finish in one more minute, I promise. So I'm gonna give you a verse where it talks about the enemy, Satan, he poses as an angel of light, and he does this as a way to trick you into interacting with him and agreeing with him. Okay, that's the first part. So to make sure you are covered in these spiritual situations, you have to test the spirits. And the Bible says specifically how to test a spirit, asking them if they confess that Jesus is God who died for your sins. Okay, so there's an exact scripture that you can say if the entity cannot acknowledge the deity of Jesus, they are false. If they try and compare Jesus to other humans, like other masters on the earth who died and stayed dead, they are not of God. So test the spirits. That's the only tip I'm going to give for now. And then they go on to other things about the Bible, about, I guess Alex Berenson got reinstated on Twitter after being kicked off for fake information, false information, which ended up being true, and all of his stuff that was true. So, and then they go talking about Robert Malone and his 9 patents creating the mRNA technology, which then he was so vocal about it and then got kicked off the internet because of that too. So many more things. Rodgers talked about his concussions. He talked about health and what, like his whole, wellness, using more natural protocols or biohacking protocols like hyperbaric chambers. He had 3 concussions that really kind of woke him up. He had a reoccurring knee injury that basically it wasn't until he changed his diet that in 2015 he took out gluten, took out dairy, and then all of a sudden that reoccurring knee injury that he had for 17 years, that's a long time, guys, then it just went away and he never had that inflammation issue come up again. They talked about the toxic elements in the food, Roundup, phthalates, and then really that's it. Like the food and the health and the natural medicine stuff, like I can go for days on that, but I'm gonna leave that for another episode because I'm already beyond my time. So this is my 18-minute summary of the Aaron Rodgers podcast with Joe Rogan. So hope you found it interesting. Let me know in the comments the topics that you want to go deeper on. I already have some at the forefront: aliens, biblical wisdom and truth, health, using nutrition as a competitive advantage and way to protect yourself in pretty much any situation. And those are my top 3. What are yours? Let's go deeper in some future episodes. And that's it. Bye and adios. Mwah.